Hello, this is Pastor Corey Sulian, and today's date is August 1st, 2023. I got to tell you about our soul winning story today. I went soul winning and I knocked on literally one door. And when the lady came to the door and answered the door, she was so happy to see me. She told me that she had been thinking about God and getting closer to Him and starting to go to church again. She had not gone to church since COVID. It's been over 3 years. She used to go to a non-denominational church here in town, but the thing that she didn't like about it was it seemed like that she said to her that the church was kind of going woke and being very politically correct and just different things like that. Well, I talked to her about my testimony, and I said, is there anything at all that I can pray for you about? And she said, yes. She said, I have a 14-year-old son, and I don't think he knows the Lord, and I would like him to be on the same page as I am when it comes to our faith. And I said, well, is he home? And she said, yes. I said, well, can I meet him? And she goes, well, I'll go see if he's interested, And so she went, hey, Vincent, someone's here to talk to you and meet you. And he came right to the door, just so open and so kind. And I got to share the gospel with him in front of his mom. Now, his mom thought she was saved about 7 years ago. Some soul winners from our church knocked on her door and talked to her about it and prayed with her. But during the prayer of salvation, she prayed with her son. And so I asked her, I said, so I know you prayed with your son just now. I said, was there, did you not really feel like you were saved? And she goes, well, I wasn't sure. And I just wanted to make sure, she said. She goes, is that bad of me? I said, no, not at all. I said, if you weren't sure, it's always better just to make sure. And I went and I spent some extra time making sure they understood what eternal security means. And so that way they know that they can't lose their salvation. And so I just went over it and over it and over it. I spent about 10 minutes or so talking about it, different Bible verses, explaining about, how her son was born to her on a certain day, and that no matter what his behavior is, he's always going to be her son, and that if he disobeyed her, the relationship might be a little bit difficult and strained and maybe even unhappy, but he's always going to be her son. And I said, if he obeys you and lives in a way that is pleasing to you, you're going to have a great relationship. And I said, it's the same thing with our Heavenly Father, that if we live in sin, if we disobey Him, if we just do things outright that we know we shouldn't do, then it's going to make our relationship with God difficult. We're going to probably be spanked by Him, and now we're always going to be saved, but we'll have not necessarily a close relationship with the Lord. And that really made sense to her. And then I also said, now, what's the most famous verse in all the Bible? And, John 3:16. So I said, well, let's think about those words. And I went through the whole verse, and I explained at the very end, it says, have everlasting life. And I said, what do you think everlasting life means? And I told her, it means never ending. That's what the word everlasting means. So I said, when you got saved, God gave you everlasting life. And that means it'll never end. And I said, now, if you sin tomorrow, God's not going to say, oh, you sinned, I'm not going to save you after all. I take it back. Because if He ever takes it back, or if you could ever lose it, it was never everlasting to begin with. But because God says in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Then that means you can have everlasting life the moment you get saved. And if it is truly everlasting, it will never, ever end. Now, one of the things I would like to encourage you about as far as a soul-winning tip, after you lead someone to Christ, there's two things that is very important for you to go over. And depending on the person, depends on, how much you have to go over each point. But number one, go over eternal security. Make sure they understand. Once God records their name in the book of life, He is never going to erase it. Once they're saved, they're always saved. This is one of the biggest struggles that new Christians have, because when they sin, they feel guilty about their sin, and they don't know if they're still saved or not. And the fact of the matter is, obviously, the Bible says that they are. Now, another reason, now this lady may have been saved 7 years ago. She may have been, because if it was a soul winner from our church, and they presented the gospel correctly and gave her a chance to pray to be saved, then she was saved. But the thing is, she never got grounded in a Bible-believing church, a Bible-based church. And so here's 7 years later, she's just not sure that she's saved. Now, it may not have been that she wasn't saved. It may have been that she was. But tonight, she wanted to make sure. And that's okay. That is okay. Now, the first thing you got to emphasize after a person gets saved is eternal security. You want them to know that they know that they know that they're not going to lose their salvation. God is not going to ever take their name out of the book of life once they're saved. Now, the second thing you've got to emphasize is they need to start going to church. If they're going to grow in the Lord, if they're going to have a successful Christian life, they need church. And so I just spent a few minutes saying, look, come to church this Sunday. I asked her, I said, do you work on Sundays? And she said, no. I said, listen, come Sunday, bring your son. You'll have a great time. She's a single parent. It's just her and her 14-year-old son that live together. And I said, look, the devil is going to do everything he can to try to talk you out of coming to church. He'll say something like, oh, you're too tired. You've got laundry to do. Don't you need to go shopping? I said, he's going to say things like that. But here's what I said to her. I said, 10 o'clock on Saturday night, you tell the devil you're going to church, and nothing that he does is going to talk you. He's not going to talk you out of it. And I said, you go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. I said, our morning service begins at 11 a.m. And I said, you don't have to leave your house until about 10:40, 10:45 maybe, and then you can get to church in 7, 8, maybe 10 minutes. And I said, it'll be fine. I said, it's not too early. You'll be just fine. Go to bed about 10 o'clock on Saturday night. And so what I did was I just drove that point home, and I'm just telling you, your new converts, if they don't start going to church right away, the devil is going to get in their head and prevent them from growing in the Lord. Now, church is important. So, when you lead someone to Christ, emphasize eternal security, and then emphasize starting to come to church. And I don't always talk about baptism right when I win them to the Lord. If it's an opportunity and they're interested, or they're talking about it, or if they have questions about getting baptized, then I do. But usually I wait until they come to church before I talk to them about baptism. But if they're interested, or if I feel like it's a good time to talk about it right then, then I do. But it's not all the time. But all the time, you should talk about eternal security and then the need of going to church now that you're saved. And so just really, 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 take some time and emphasize that. Now, I'm going to give you one last thought. Every single person that you pray with, every single person that I pray with, one of three things is happening. Number one, they're truly getting saved, okay? That's what's happening. Number two, they were already saved, but they don't necessarily have the assurance of salvation. So you're giving them the assurance of salvation. The lady that I prayed with tonight, she did it 7 years ago, but she wasn't sure that she was still saved, right? Or, whatever the reason may be. Then there's no reason to even mess with it. Just go ahead and make sure. So I think she got assurance of her salvation, but her son, her 14-year-old son, this was the first time for sure that he did it. The third thing that could be happening is that they're lying to you. That means they're really not getting saved at all. So every time I pray with someone, they're either getting saved, getting the assurance of their salvation, or they're lying to me. And it's between them and God. And I just don't worry about it. Every single person that I pray with, do I think, 100% of them are getting saved? No, not at all. But I do know I do the best I can to present the gospel clearly, to answer any questions that they have, and then I give them an opportunity to pray and make a decision to be saved. Now, is it possible that they could be praying just so that I would leave? Absolutely. Does it happen? I'm sure it does. I just don't know who it's happening to, right? I leave that between them and God. I just do my part, and I give them an opportunity to get saved, and then that's between them and God, if it's real or not. So at any rate, just wanted to throw that out there. Always, always, always give them eternal security verses, or at least talk to them about it, and then always invite them to church and stress the importance of, now that you're saved, you really need to go to church. And I think it would be a blessing. And thank you so much for listening. And man, I felt so good. Knocked on one door tonight, just one door, and got to see 2 people pray for their salvation. What a blessing. God is so good. God bless.